I've been extensively testing out the PS5 Pro for about a month and a half now to answer the ultimate question: is the PS5 Pro worth buying if you've already got a PS5? Well, during my testing, I've discovered 4 ways in which the PS5 Pro visibly improves over the PS5. And those are in gaming experience, storage, ports, and body. But before we continue, a quick shout out to Bitdefender for their free AI-powered Scamio service, the best way to detect and prevent online scams. You can find out more later in the video. Okay, so let me start with the gaming experience, as this is why you're all here for. This boils down to 2 types of games. 1, games that did not get a clear PS5 Pro patch, and 2, games that did get a clear PS5 Pro patch. So let me start with the first one, games that did not get a clear PS5 Pro patch. And by this I mean games that did get a PS5 Pro patch, but that patch did not introduce any specific PS5 Pro graphical modes. And the first of those games is Diablo 4. In the character selection screen, you can see that for the Necromancer background, the PS5 Pro has more rendering distance, as it can display things like the skeletons on the left here. If we look at my Sorcerer, the PS5 Pro shows the reflections of the candles in the ground, which are missing from the PS5. And if we look at my Spiritborn, we can see how the foliage in the background is ever so slightly sharper. When it comes to the actual gameplay, the PS5 Pro seems to run at a slightly higher resolution. We can see that the ground texture is clear on the PS5 Pro compared to the standard PS5. Same thing here inside the Alchemist building if we look at the hay on the ground. Or here, when we go up the stairs, where we can see that the shadow on the building to the left is improved on the PS5 Pro. These differences are small indeed. However, when I was playing the game and actually moving around, I was able to perceive this extra sharpness on the PS5 Pro right away. Which brings me to the next game that got no visible new graphic mode, and that is Call of Duty Black Ops 6. And here, the differences were much bigger. When we compare the default 4K 60Hz modes, the PS5 Pro is significantly sharper, as you can see from these fine topographic lines on the map. This extra sharpness is especially noticeable when you take a look at the documents here, which are almost readable on the PS5 Pro, whereas on the PS5, these are quite blurry. However, the biggest difference is when playing in the 120Hz mode. The PS5 cannot run this in 4K, instead, it runs it at close to 1440p. The PS5 Pro, however, is able to run this at a much higher resolution. Our capture card unfortunately cannot capture 4K 120, so we have to record this using our camera, and unfortunately, it is really hard to tell the difference from the footage. But what I can say is that playing in the 120Hz mode on the PS5 Pro, it didn't feel like I was getting any resolution downgrade compared to playing it in 4K 60. Unlike the base PS5. However, the PS5 Pro did have some artifacting, likely caused by the PS5 Pro's new image upscaling technique, which is PSSR. This was mostly visible in cloth simulations that had this very visible noise, and I've actually noticed this in a few other games as well, more on that later. And this brings me to games that did get a very clear PS5 Pro update. The first of which is God of War Ragnarok. If we go into the settings menu, we can now see a PS5 Pro enhanced mode that seems to push 60 FPS at a higher resolution compared to the base PS5 thanks to PSSR upscaling. If we take a look at the bush here, right behind here, it is significantly higher res on the PS5 Pro, and same goes for the rock behind. This is also noticeably sharper on the Pro. Same goes here if we take a look at Kratos' armor. The writing on it looks noticeably sharper on the PS5 Pro. Will you actually notice these improvements when you're in a fighting scene? Probably not. However, in scenes where you're standing still to admire the artwork, you might. Which brings me to Horizon Forbidden West, where the improvements are much more visible. So we've got 2 new PS5 Pro graphical modes. Favor Performance, which runs the PS5's High Fidelity mode, a 30 FPS mode at 60 FPS, and then Favor Resolution Pro, which actually runs at 30 FPS but pushes the graphics even further. Now, I did find the existence of such mode to go against the entire idea that Sony was pushing for the PS5 Pro, that it's meant to be a console that combines the performance and the quality modes into one single 4K 60 mode without any compromises. Okay, so let's first talk about the performance mode on both consoles. The PS5 Pro definitely looks sharper, which we can see if we take a look at a ground texture, and even the shadows are improved if you take a look at where the campfire smoke is. Then the drawing distance is also improved. The bottom left area here is not only noticeably sharper on the PS5 Pro, but we can also see those 2 extra bushes with the blue flowers that are completely missing from the base PS5. So what about the resolution mode? Well, in terms of the overall sharpness, they both look identical here. But where I think the PS5 Pro shines is when it comes to its shadows that seem to be more defined, and they do look a bit more realistic on the PS5 Pro. But other than that, I haven't really noticed any other advantages to this new 30 FPS resolution mode on the PS5 Pro. So really, the main advantage of the PS5 Pro here is that new Performance Pro mode, which in gameplay, you'll definitely be able to notice that extra sharpness. And this brings me to Last of Us Part 1 Remastered. This now has a Pro Performance mode that still renders the game at 1440p 60 FPS and still upscales it to 4K, but now uses PSSR, so the upscaling result should be much closer to native 4K. And to my surprise, this was actually the game that had the biggest difference, despite there being almost no difference from the official Sony footage. Both consoles are set to their 60 FPS modes, yet the PS5 Pro is significantly higher res. You can see this in Ellie's backpack, Joel's hair, and especially the background, which looks like 1080p on the base PS5 as opposed to 4K on the PS5 Pro. Or here, where Joel is walking towards the building, the resolution of the foliage and everything really is much higher on the PS5 Pro. So indeed, playing this game on the PS5 Pro is a significantly better experience than on the base PS5. However, the most unexpected thing to me was when I had a look at the PS5 Pro in Pro mode versus the PS5 in its 30 FPS quality mode, as the PS5 Pro actually looked sharper, even though they're both meant to be 4K. If we take a look at the background, you can see that a door is higher res on the PS5 Pro, or even those documents on the left-hand side, those are also sharper on the PS5 Pro. And of course, the PS5 Pro runs at 60 as opposed to 30 on the base PS5. Okay, so earlier I mentioned Bitdefender's Scameo service, a free AI-powered chatbot that makes detecting scams a breeze. You see, online scams are everywhere, costing victims $8.8 billion in 2022 alone. From fake links to phishing messages, scammers use AI to stay ahead. But now, you can too. Whether you're sharing screenshots, links, or QR codes, Scameo analyzes your input in seconds, using Bitdefender's award-winning threat detection. I tried this myself with a text I received from an every scam, and Scameo spotted the threat instantly. With no downloads required, Scameo works seamlessly on WhatsApp, Messenger, and now Discord too. Discord's moderation tools can only do so much, but Scameo's user-friendly interface, real-time updates, and advice make it the perfect digital bodyguard. On top of this, it works in all of these languages too. Think you can tell what's a scam and what isn't? Well, you can test Scameo for yourselves and protect your Discord community by using the link below. And the last game that I tested was Spider-Man 2. On the PS5 Pro, there are two Pro modes here as well. Performance Pro, which has the same quality as Fidelity mode on the PS5, but uses PSSR to run at 60 as opposed to 30. And then Fidelity Pro mode, which is a 30 FPS mode which has some additional ray tracing features that you could also manually adjust to get about 40 to 50 FPS here. Starting off with performance mode on both, the PS5 Pro is definitely higher res. If we zoom into some of the buildings, you'll be able to see that the standard PS5 has this weird noise, whereas the PS5 Pro is much cleaner. The bigger difference is over here if we take a look at the trees in the background. You can see that the base PS5 is heavily sharpened, whereas the PS5 Pro is significantly clearer, showing us that PSSR is indeed a superior upscaling technique compared to dynamic resolution, which is what the PS5 was using. We can also see the greater traffic density on the PS5 Pro compared to the PS5. And of course, we do get all of those ray tracing capabilities of the 30 FPS fidelity mode on the PS5, only at 60 FPS on the PS5 Pro. The only downside is that I have noticed some PSSR artifacting here as well, just like I did in Black Ops 6. If we take a look at the window here, you can probably see that flickering, or in this building in the far distance, you can see it here as well. So what about that Fidelity Pro mode? Well, if we compare the reflections, they are not only higher res on the PS5 Pro, the reflections in the buildings in the distance seem to be much smoother, whereas on the PS5, they are quite sharp. Although the footage itself, interesting enough, does actually look lower res on the PS5 Pro, which is odd to me. Maybe the PS5 Pro is pushing its ray tracing so hard here that PSSR had to lower the resolution below 4K. Although you could also argue that a PS5 Pro has more natural depth of field, whereas the PS5 simply over-sharpens everything, hence the perceived clearer image on the base PS5. So just like in Horizon Forbidden West, the best graphical mode here is once again that 60 FPS mode, which thanks to PSSR is definitely sharper on the PS5 Pro. Now, before I give you the conclusion on whether or not it's worth buying the PS5 Pro, there are 3 other improvements that you get that are non-gaming related, which I do want to mention. Now, the first non-gaming improvement is the storage. The PS5 Pro comes with 2 TB of storage by default, as opposed to just 825 on the original PS5 or 1 TB on the PS5 Slim. And that's actually huge. On my PS5, I had to install a 2 TB M.2 in order to fit all of my games. However, on the PS5 Pro, I didn't need to do that at all, as the 2 TB of internal storage was able to fit all of my games on it. Plus, the PS5 Pro still supports an M.2 drive as well, so you can just take that out of your PS5 and then pop it into your PS5 Pro and instantly get access to all of those games that way. Now, the next improvement is when it comes to the ports. The front USB-A port has now been replaced by USB Type-C, which is actually better for future proofing. Although, honestly, for me, this is actually a downgrade. You see, the DualSense Edge controller that I use has a terrible battery life, so I often find myself needing to plug it in. However, the cable that it comes with is a USB-A to C cable, which means that I now need to plug it through the back, which is not as convenient, or buy an entirely new long USB-C to C cable. And the other disadvantage is when I'm using my Pulse Elite headset, which uses a USB-A dongle to connect. I often have connection issues with this headset, so sometimes I need to unplug and re-plug that dongle, which was far easier to do when it was plugged into the front. Now I need to take out my PS5 Pro to re-plug the dongle, which is just not great. Sony needs to release a USB-C version of that dongle ASAP. And the last improvement is the body of the PS5 Pro itself, which is far smaller and far lighter than I thought. My PS5 Pro was the original model with a disk drive, which means that it is actually the biggest and heaviest PS5 ever made. The PS5 Pro is not only considerably smaller, but it is also much lighter, at 3.1 kilograms as opposed to 4.5. By the way, you've probably been wondering throughout this video, where did I get this wallpaper behind me? Well, it's from our new wallpaper pack, Northern Nightfall, designed by me. With Northern Nightfall, I wanted to showcase some beautiful night landscapes with visible northern lights, and I've got 10 unique 8K designs that will look fantastic on your phone, tablet, or even on your desktop. And there's plenty of room to zoom in and reframe, making each wallpaper super customizable. Now, if you're after something more Christmassy, we've got you covered with Christmas Cheer by our designer Alisher. This pack features 10 beautiful wintry Christmas scenes, everything from the classic Christmas tree to a snow-covered cabin in the woods, and even Santa Claus himself. You can find Northern Nightfall and Christmas Cheer plus 130 more packs in our app Wallpapers for iOS and Android. Links down below. But okay, having said all of this, is it actually worth buying a PS5 Pro if you already have a PS5? Well, for the most part, I would actually say no. And that's because the PS5 Pro costs $700. And if you also need a disk drive, then guess what? Scalpers have bought all of them, so you'll need to spend another $150 or so for that. Oh, and if you also need a vertical stand as well, then that no longer comes in the box, so you'll have to pay another $30 for it. So by the time you've bought everything that the original PS5 came with, you'd be paying close to $900 for the PS5 Pro. Now, you do get way more storage, which I think is worth noting, as that is worth about $100 alone. And while in some games like Last of Us, Horizon Forbidden West, and Spider-Man, you can actually see a very substantial difference, in other games like Diablo 4 or God of War Ragnarok, the improvements are more minimal. So the main people who I would recommend a PS5 Pro to are serious gamers who already have a high-end 4K TV or monitor that's OLED and also has a high refresh rate, and you also want to play games in 4K 60 or even 4K 120, as in that case, you will definitely notice a difference, like in Black Ops 6. And I'm pretty sure that more games will get updated moving forward, including GTA 6 when it launches next year. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts as well and your experiences with the PS5 Pro. And if you want to continue this conversation, feel free to check out our Discord channel, which is linked down below and also free to join. I'm Daniel, this means ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.